BCS Countdown is presented by Vizio. And now your host, Reese Davis.
One more domino falls in the chase for the BCS championship. In a matter of moments, we'll fill out the top 10. There will be changes, particularly at the top. King SEC has been toppled. Fans outside the Southeastern Conference are probably rejoicing, at least for now. 3 teams can still grasp perfection: Oregon, Kansas State, Notre Dame. They'll be in the top 3, but one of them is going to have to try to remain perfect and also hold out hope that somebody else will fall to the pressure.
Time. Either there's never enough, or too much. Alabama's epic fall shakes up the race at a time when they just needed to hold on.
1 is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. 2 can be as bad as 1. It's the loneliest number since the number 1.
This is starting to get interesting. With the keystone jarred loose, where do they fall? And who is number 1?
1 is the loneliest number. 1 is the loneliest.
3 more weeks to go. If you want clarity, all you need is 1 more loss. If you want chaos, you're 1 step closer to it. Glad to have you with us. Jesse Palmer, David Pollack here. Let's go ahead and jump in, boys. Start counting down the BCS top 25. 11 through 25, brought to you by Discovered Card in Washington. Bow down to the Huskies as they make their way in at number 25.
What about Michigan at number 21? If you're Brady Hoke, you may have a quarterback controversy moving forward. Devin Gardner has looked really good over his last 2 games in place of Denard Robinson.
16 through 20, Oregon State falls at Stanford, so they slip. They still get a shot at Oregon later in the season. UCLA and USC, that is going to be the Pac-12 South Championship game coming up on Saturday. The winner will go on to play the champion of the North, presumed to be Oregon.
Louisville. We are who you thought you were.
Oh, yeah, Louisville fell to Syracuse. Still have a chance to win the Big East right now, but they're a game in the conference standings behind Rutgers. And 11 through 15, look at old Texas slipping around.
Texas is there, and I tell you what, they're playing better on defense. It was hard not to play better, but if you look at Texas, they might hold the chip to the chaos, playing Kansas State the last week of the season.
And remember, 14 is a significant number. You have to get in the top 14 to be eligible to be selected for a BCS at-large berth. What's the most impressive thing you saw on Saturday?
Freshman quarterbacks. Johnny Manziel puts up 345 yards against Alabama. Marcus Mariota, 6 touchdown passes against Cal. It's amazing to think both of those guys were committed to Oregon at one time. And Everett Golson, guys, at Notre Dame gets better and better each and every week. I was really impressed with the freshman spinning the magic bean.
I wasn't that impressed with Golson against Boston College. I thought they should have done a little bit more. But I tell you what I was impressed with? Next guy up. Chip Kelly talks about it with Oregon. That was a mass unit. I mean, they had everybody going down left and right. Mariota goes down at one point. I was like, oh, Lord, that's it. Remember Boyette earlier in the season? You see Avery go down as well.
Avery
Patterson. They've been going down like 3 freshmen on the defensive line playing a lot, but they still went next guy up the second half, really came through and put on a good performance.
Had to tape Kenyon Barner's hand up a little bit, and we'll find out in a couple of minutes whether Oregon is the new number 1 team in the BCS standings. As always, we are joined by Kirk Herbstreit. Kirk, what are you most looking forward to seeing when we unveil the top 10?
Well, obviously everybody wants to see what's going to happen with Alabama and how far they end up falling. We got a little bit of a hint when you look at the polls, 2/3 of the BCS standings. But the thing that really stood out to me, Reese, this weekend was not just A&M beating Alabama, but Alabama's coming off a week where they were shooken up a little bit by LSU on the road. They had a whole week to get ready for Johnny football. They knew what was coming. And the fact that Kevin Sumlin got his team to play the way they did, coaches talk about playing to win. Well, they coached to win. It was an aggressive mindset, even when they had the lead in the second half. It was so refreshing to watch that kind of attitude from a head coach and from a football team. So it wasn't just the win, it was how A&M went about it. And obviously, they're going to be rewarded by what you've shown so far. You'd expect them to get up into the top 10.
All right, Kirk, it's time to end the drama. The top 10 in the BCS standings brought to you by Allstate. Checking in at number 10, the Florida State Seminoles, after escaping against Virginia Tech. Now, Jimbo Fisher's team solidly number 6 in both polls, but the computers can't stand them. They're number 17. Massey and Sagarin don't even have them ranked in the top 25. That's weighting down the Seminoles' cause. If we ever got to a one-loss scenario, seems highly unlikely they would be in the mix. Just ahead of Florida State, South Carolina. South Carolina probably didn't enjoy Texas A&M's victory over Alabama because of this. The Aggies zoom up the board to number 7. They've got an emerging star in Johnny Manziel. They've got 2 what should be easy wins to finish at home against Sam Houston State and Missouri. And the Aggies are going to be a hugely attractive candidate to be an at-large team in a BCS Bowl. Texas A&M's victory might have even hurt a team that beat the Aggies. LSU is just a spot ahead of A&M at the moment. Certainly the Bayou Bengals still an attractive at-large candidate. Florida, 1 loss, not impressive the last couple of weeks. Still a date with Florida State coming. Gators sitting at 6. A lot of SEC teams. You already see 1, 2, 3, 4 SEC teams, and you're going to see 2 more at 4 and 5 in Georgia and Alabama. Assuming the Crimson Tide doesn't lose to Auburn, the order of these 2 doesn't matter because they'll play in the SEC championship game. At number 5, Georgia, Alabama falls from 1 to 4. Now, those 2 teams sitting best among the 1-loss teams if we get to that scenario. Now, here's the spot. The 3 undefeated teams, of course, only 2 in the championship game. I think the primary drama is who's going to be left out. Most expecting that Kansas State is going to be number 1. And the Wildcats are. Bill Snyder's team with dates against Baylor and Texas left. That's all that's standing between them and a spot in the national championship game. First time the Wildcats have ever been number 1 in the BCS, and also ends the SEC's record 14-week span of sitting atop the BCS standings. So who's left out? Oregon, Notre Dame left. Computers love the Fighting Irish. Pollsters love the Ducks. Oregon commanding in number 1 in both polls, the Harris and the coaches poll. So sitting at number 3 and left out at the moment, Notre Dame. Now it's going to be key to watch this margin here as Oregon is number 2. And you see the margin is pretty close. The problem is not enough room necessarily for Oregon to move up in the polls, and the Fighting Irish don't have a lot of room to move up in the computers. So how will the voters be influenced? You're going to have some common opponents coming up. Notre Dame still has a date with SC, who Oregon's already beaten. Oregon has a date this weekend with Stanford that Notre Dame outlasted in overtime. How will voters compare those 2 games? But as it stands right now, if we've learned anything, there's a lot of football to be played. If we had the championship game at the moment, it would be Bill Snyder's Wildcats against Chip Kelly's Ducks. Kansas State and Oregon, Kirk, is that as it should be?
Well, I think if you look at the pollsters, they have Oregon up at number 1 and Kansas State at 2. And you set the table up perfectly there, Reese, as far as what the voters are going to ultimately have to decide upon when they get down to these last 3 weeks and looking at style points. It's amazing. And I know Jesse and David are going to talk about this. It's almost as if people forget about what happened in September, in the early part of October. And now it's just fine-tuning and looking at last week. And boy, Oregon didn't look very good last week in the first half. Well, they turned it on, and okay, now they righted the ship, and they're going to be okay. So these teams are going to deal with so much pressure from the outside world. It's not just about matching up with who they're playing. It's with dealing with that psychological warfare on the outside world, because every series is going to matter for the offense and the defense. You know why? Everybody wants to talk about Oregon's defense and what they did against USC. You know what people forget to talk about with Oregon's defense? What they did to Arizona, who's the 6th-ranked defense or offense in the entire country, and they put a goose egg up against that Oregon defense. So it's easy to kind of spin this however you want, depending on really who you're a fan of.
There's no question, Kirk. Look, it's clear-cut what's going to happen. I mean, if Kansas State and Oregon went out, they're going to play. I mean, Notre Dame's not going to be able to pass them. Notre Dame needs somebody to lose. There is an elephant in the room, though. 6 of the top 9 teams in the BCS standings are from the SEC.
6 of 9.
6 of 9.
In a row.
That's never happened. 6 in a row. But right now, the SEC wouldn't play for the championship, wouldn't even be in the championship game. 3 weeks from now, is that the way it will still be?
I think that's the way it's going to be. They need help. You just mentioned it. They need Oregon or Kansas State or Notre Dame, 2 of the 3, to lose. And I don't think Kansas State or Oregon are going to lose. Now, it's very difficult to go throughout the course of a season unbeaten, especially in the SEC. You have to bring your A game each and every week, and that hasn't happened. Even though the SEC is the best conference in college football, guys, I think Alabama's and Georgia's regular season schedules actually hurt them. Alabama not having to play Florida, Georgia, or South Carolina in the regular season, and Georgia not having to play Alabama, LSU, Mississippi State, or Texas A&M, I think that actually hurts them in this case.
Both of those teams beat 2 ranked opponents so far this season. I mean, both of those teams, talking about Georgia and Alabama. I just, you know, the first thing that comes up and the first thing that everybody says is, can a one-loss Alabama jump Notre Dame?
No.
Can a one-loss Alabama jump any of the teams? And that's not the case, and it shouldn't be the case. But you look at 6 through 9 being the all-SEC and chaos needs to happen. I don't think it'd be the end of the world if you said Texas beat Kansas State at the end of the season. I think we all believe that Notre Dame could lose to USC. The question becomes, the SEC is so stacked in that next clump that one of those teams would be the next teams to step up. And it's just crazy to think about how many teams right there are lumped together.
Under that scenario, I think it's pretty clear-cut. The winner of the SEC championship game, assuming Alabama gets there, and they have to beat Auburn to lock it up. The winner of that game would play if you have 2 of the 3 lose. I think also pressing in the minds of some fans, Kirk, as you look at where Notre Dame sits right now. And I said earlier, I think realistically it's clear. Notre Dame needs one of the 2 teams in front of them to lose. Is there anything the Irish could do for the rest of the season that would change your mind or change your perception of that for the Irish?
Well, again, I think we're nitpicking here. I think they have Wake Forest left at home, and then they go on the road against USC in a high-profile game and a showcase game for them to really show what they can do. I think the following week, the fact that they're going to be done, Hayes in a barn, 12 games, they could be 12-0, and these other teams like Kansas State playing Texas and like Oregon State having a game probably more than likely, or Oregon rather, against UCLA, they're going to be sitting back and watching and hoping for a loss. Sometimes it's nice to play on that weekend to remind people how good you really are. But I think it's very clear. Brad Edwards has made it clear. I know you were going to talk to him in a little bit. The numbers speak for themselves. No matter what you or I or anybody thinks, Notre Dame needs help. And Oregon, if they went out against Stanford and Oregon State and eventually UCLA, all they're going to do is strengthen themselves, not only with the polls, but they're going to close the gap in the computers, making it next to impossible for Notre Dame to go by Oregon. So they need an Oregon loss or they need a Kansas State loss. It's as simple as that. And if Notre Dame's 12-0 and they're left out of the national championship with all those Pac-12 teams, with the exception of Oregon, potentially all having 3 losses, Notre Dame will end up in Pasadena playing the Big Ten champ.
Oh, okay, I'm with you. But I'm gonna put you on the spot. Is that right? Should it be that way? Should Notre Dame be left out unless some of them lose? Anything could change. I know what's going to happen. I'm asking you what should happen.
I think Oregon's the best team in college football. I think that their offense, the firepower that they have, just when you think that, boy, this team's, they're not quite hitting on all cylinders, they scored 21 points. So because of that firepower, because of the tempo, I think Oregon's the best team, and I think Kansas State has earned the right to be a solid number 2 with Notre Dame at 3. You feel so bad sitting here. This team is going to be undefeated possibly, and we have to sit here and find reasons not to put them up there. But the reality is Oregon for me, Kansas State, and then Notre Dame sitting there at 3.
There still is a lot of room to go, a lot of season to play, see if the Irish can move up. So maybe things don't look so rosy for them right now in the BCS in terms of the championship game. But could it be that things are indeed very rosy for the Fighting Irish in terms of their postseason aspirations? Brad Edwards will come along to fill out all of those BCS projections. And now you have a little bit of chaos in the offing. Could it be that a one-loss scenario team would get into it? We'll see.
BCS Countdown is presented by Vizio. Welcome to the PC, reimagined. And in part by Tostitos. Tostitos knows how to party.
All right, just 3 weeks left in the season, so time to do some bowl projections. BCS guru Brad Edwards here. Couple things to keep in mind. No conference can have more than 2 teams in BCS games, and for at-large teams, they have to be in the top 14. With that in mind, fill out the spots for the BCS game?
Obviously, it starts with 1 and 2. We have those teams right now, Kansas State and Oregon. Then the conference champions that have an automatic tie-in are assigned. Big Ten, we all know, goes to the Rose Bowl. That right now would be Nebraska. Pac-12 champion already in this game, so we'll skip them. Big 12 champion normally goes to Fiesta. We'll skip that one for now. SEC champion would go to the Sugar, highest-ranked team, Alabama. We'll put them in there. ACC champion projects to be Florida State at the moment. They go to the Orange. Now we go back and we'll go through the selection process.
These are the large teams or the replacement.
Yeah, that's right. The bowl that loses the #1 ranked team gets to pick first. That would be the Big 12 champion to the Fiesta as we sit right now. Notre Dame's attractive, no doubt about it, but I think they stay true to the Big 12 roots. I think they would take Oklahoma instead of Notre Dame. Now, same thing applies here. Rose Bowl gets to replace #2. At the moment, there's another Pac-12 team, but if Oregon goes undefeated, they would beat Stanford this week. Stanford would fall out. Oregon State would take another loss. I don't think there would be another option from within the Pac-12. I think they go Notre Dame for the opponent for the Big Ten. Then comes time for the Fiesta to pick again. Now, you can see there are a bunch of SEC teams out there. Just like Reese said, no conference can have more than 2 teams taken. So whichever team goes next out of the SEC, the rest of them are all shut out of the BCS. I think they go SEC with the Fiesta. Maybe not the team most people think. I think Texas A&M has now put itself in position to be chosen. I think they have the most marketable player in the SEC, Johnny Manziel, maybe the most marketable in all of college football, and they're the closest geographically to the state of Arizona. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Old Big 12 matchup there.
Now we fill it out. There's not much left to choose from at this point when you eliminate the SEC. I think if Clemson wins out, that's kind of a no-brainer right there. Southern team, Southern Bowl game, and then left over is the Big East champ. Right now that projects to be Louisville taking on Florida State in the Orange.
Okay, so in the scenario, very quickly, if Clemson were to lose to South Carolina, say fall out of the top 14, how does the BCS fill all of the spots if there aren't eligible teams by the first rule?
They'll just keep going as far down as they have to in order to find enough teams to fill the spots. It's not ideal, but with all these SEC teams, it very well could happen this year.
Okay, so here are Brad Edwards' projections. You see those including the national championship game. Kirk, what's your biggest issue with these projections?
My biggest issue, Brad Edwards, I'll tell you what, I'll let you get to Twitter and get to the biggest issues, but I will ask you about Notre Dame. And you mentioned how things have changed now without the assumption of Alabama winning out and of course, being there, and maybe it being a given that the Big 12 may be able to put Kansas State in there. Now, if we start to project Kansas State out there, Brad, why would the Big 12, or the conference, rather, the Fiesta Bowl, rather, pick a Big 12 team as opposed to going for that attractive, undefeated Notre Dame team?
Well, Kirk, as you're well aware, they don't have to, even though that is the conference tie-in. They can go off the board, and a lot of people would think that would be the smart thing to do. Not only because of the name Notre Dame, but the fact that you're talking about an undefeated team as opposed to a 2-loss team. But even though the Fiesta has not had a tie-in with the Big 12 for all that long, the Big 12 as a conference hasn't been around for all that long, what I hear is that it's still very important to them to keep that allegiance to the Big 12, and I'm told that's the direction they're likely to go.
Jesse, what jumps out at you about Brad's projections?
2 ACC teams playing in BCS bowl games, and I think the ACC is the 5th best automatic qualifying conference. There's only 1 Pac-12 team playing in this model, and I think the Pac-12 is the 2nd best conference. Now, we're assuming, obviously, Clemson beats South Carolina at the end of the year. And it's important to remember, Florida State and Clemson, in my opinion, are 2 elite teams. We'll find out more about Clemson and Florida State down the road in the regular season when they play Florida and South Carolina respectively. But Alabama-Clemson would be a lot of fun to watch in the Sugar Bowl.
I will say that the big thing at the end of this month that will be fun to watch is Florida State versus Florida. That'll be fun. And then South Carolina versus Clemson. You're talking about that clump of ACC teams that are on the outside of that 4 through 9 SEC, if they could make a dent in that. And then what would have happened if some of those teams at the front lost and you had no undefeateds? Team like Florida State being left out of the mix altogether.
And remember, Brad made these projections based on where things stand right now. The only assumptions he had to make is to keep Oregon in the championship game. He had to say that they beat Oregon State and Stanford, which, to your point, would make them ineligible to be in the BCS in the large pool, unless they have to expand it. A lot of football. A lot of football still to play. Still some chaos could be in the offing. Who knows?
One is the loneliest number.
Welcome back to BCS Countdown, presented by Vizio.
This BCS moment is brought to you by Tostitos. Only 2 years ago, out in the desert as Auburn beat Oregon. Cam Newton, after that transcendent season that he had, Ontario McCaleb, Malcolm Dyer just getting past Michael James and the Ducks 22-19. That was clear cut that year. Those two teams were undefeated. Everybody thought that they were the two best teams. When you look at the BCS standings, anybody aside from the top three undefeated that you think subjectively better than the undefeated top
There are
three?
two one-loss teams that could do it, but I'm going to point at a two-loss team, and LSU right now at number 7. That's good enough to beat any of the teams ranked 1 through 3. Their last two games, Zach Mettenberger has been playing out of his mind. This offense has balance. When you consider all the playmakers and athletes they have on D, LSU is good enough to beat Oregon, K-State, or Notre Dame.
I think 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10 could all beat Notre Dame.
Would you rank them there? If you were,
So where's Notre Dame?
I think they all. No, I'm saying they all could beat Notre Dame.
we may stretch some of this into the ESPN half hour coming up in just a little
Notre
bit.
Dame fans can spew some hate at me. Go ahead.
They're not going to make a statue of you in South Bend anytime soon. They might make a statue in Manhattan, Kansas of Colin Klein. Maybe some other guys as well have some hero moments left in the rest of the season.
On ESPNU, BCS Countdown, the BCS Standings, presented by Vizio. Kansas State, Oregon, who's number 1, who's number 2? It's coming up.
BCS Countdown is presented by Vizio. And now your host, Reese Davis.
Another week, another undefeated team goes down at the top, along with Louisville. Ohio State sitting there ineligible, so we're down to 3. Glad to have you with us, BCS Countdown. You know Jesse Palmer and David Pollack. Let's get right to it. The top 10 of the BCS standings presented by Allstate. It looks like this. You see all of those SEC teams in a row, 6 of them. First time one conference has ever had 6 teams ranked in the top 10. But the Southeastern Conference's streak of 14 straight weeks having a team on top comes to an end after Alabama's loss to Texas A&M. K-State, number 1 in the BCS for the first time ever. Oregon ahead of Notre Dame. Oregon dominant in the polls. They're number 1 in both polls. Huge edge there. And Notre Dame needs a loss. They need either Kansas State or the Ducks to fall if they want to get in the championship game.
So the number 1 team in the country, Alabama, falls to A&M, a Big 12 team. And SEC dominance might be ended by a future or a former Big 12 team. It's kind of interesting.
It could be.
Poetic justice.
And along that line, a new team on the top is a Big 12 team, a team that has a chance to end the SEC streak of 6 straight national championships, whether they play an SEC team or not. Kansas State. This is one of the most remarkable stories in the history of college football. Remember, when Bill Snyder took over the first time, worst program ever. And I'm not even using hyperbole. They were. He built them into a power. Left, came back, and now he's done it again. They're number 1. They're on top, and if they win out, if they beat Baylor, beat Texas, they're going to play for the national championship.
Each and every week we sit here, guys, and we talk about how complete of a team Kansas State is, whether it's offense, defense, special teams, their ability to run the football, throw it, Heisman contender playing quarterback, the athletes, don't have penalties, don't turn the football over. But that ability to be complete is so big because this past weekend, for example, against TCU, when Colin Klein's not having his best day throwing the football, and he's struggling, and he's been sacked a couple times, the defense and special teams is able to pick this team up. They get 2 turnovers. Special teams, they kick 3 field goals. At the end of the day, it saves the team. Being complete so big because Colin Klein isn't always going to have his A game. But because they're that entire team, it's huge for them each and every week, and that's why right now, number 1.
And I think just having legit weapons as well. I mean, it's not just Colin Klein, and we see him breaking runs and making plays, but even in the backfield, Peace coming in and making plays. I mean, Lockett, Harper, they've got a bunch of different guys. And the one thing that they always do, they're always in the right position on defense, and they always force turnovers. Every single game, they force turnovers, and every single game, they rarely give it away. I mean, 2 turnovers now in Big 12 play throughout the season. Are you kidding me?
Bill Snyder's
That's
formula
crazy.
is not sexy, but they do what they have to do to win games. My one concern for Kansas State moving forward is having to play Texas the last game of the regular season. Texas is a very different team in their last 2 games. Their defense all of a sudden is tackling people. They're keeping the football in front of them, not giving up explosive plays. And since getting benched against Kansas, David Ash is playing excellent football in these last 2 weeks. And let's not forget Manny Diaz in this game last year when Kansas State played Texas.
Locked them down.
Kansas State won, but they only had 121 total yards of offense. Manny Diaz had this scheme. Now, I understand Ocho and Robinson, a lot of those pieces aren't on the field, but that's a game to circle right now if you're Kansas State. Watch out.
How cool would it be, or not cool, but how apropos would it be or fitting that Kansas State, who's been the thorn in the side for Texas for so many years, that Texas could return the favor and give it back to them and cost them a national championship? Because as good as Texas has been, Kansas State still consistently beats them.
And remember, '98 Kansas State was this close to playing for it as well, and then they got thumped by Texas A&M in the Big 12 championship game and got knocked out of it. So maybe the Wildcats will be able to persevere. No Big 12 championship game in which to stumble this year, just that game against Texas that you mentioned. All right, Oregon is number 2, and they have a comfortable lead in the polls in terms of being the #1 team for 67% of the BCS formula. #1 in the coaches, #1 in the Harris. Computer rank, still not as strong as they would hope. The Ducks, you know, the computers haven't fallen in love with them, but the eye test, the subjectivity, everybody else has, it seems.
Oh, absolutely. And I think there's a reason why, because we talked about Marcus Mariota taking this offense to the next level. He's done it. I mean, if Darren Thomas, who won all those games as a starter, was on this roster right now, he would be sitting on the bench behind Marcus Mariota. I mean, he runs the ball so well. He's throwing it and understanding the offense. And the best thing is, he's a flatliner, dude. I mean, you run that no-huddle, fast, up-tempo offense, and he's just kind of like this. Yeah, let's go. Run up the huddle.
It's that Hawaii. He goes into that Hawaii chill mode.
He's so chill. Hang loose. Let's do it. I mean, he's done a great job in orchestrating the offense. They still got the weapons. I mean, defensively, you know, they're banged up even more so than ever, and I think that could cause some problems down the road, but their offense has answered every question.
Marcus Mariota is the best quarterback Chip Kelly has ever had at Oregon right now, as in right now.
Right now.
As a redshirt freshman.
Not projecting, not ceiling, right
as
now.
of right today on Sunday. And this offense continues to impress me. And whether it was last week putting up 62 against USC, we always thought if you stop Oregon's running game, you give yourself the best chance to win. Well, Marcus Mariota goes out and throws 6 touchdown passes against Cal. They are so balanced right now on offense because of the quarterback play. This is the first offense in college football history to score more than 42 points in their first 10 games of a season. They're electric. And Josh Huff, by the way, we talk about all these other playmakers. Josh Huff in his last 2 games is averaging over 100 yards a game, and he's got 5 catching touchdowns. So there's just weapons all over the field. The problem, your point, defense.
Banged
and
up.
Run defense.
And injuries.
And run defense is bad. They give up 5.5 yards a carry against USC. Cal toted it for 6 a carry. They were getting gashed. That could be a huge problem this week when they play Stanford.
I was going to say, is that the equalizer against Stanford? Because I think that what we said for the last couple of years, Stanford, great team, terrible matchup because of speed on the edges against Oregon. Could that be the equalizer Saturday? Could it be a stumbling point for Oregon?
It could be. And I think Stanford's best defense in that game is a great offense. They have to be able to stay on the field, run Stephon Taylor. They have to run Hogan at quarterback. They have to find ways to stay on the field and convert against that Oregon defense that's been very susceptible this year up front in the front 7, at least recently.
But Oregon's defense last year up front was susceptible, and Andrew Luck was pulling the string. Andrew Luck. Okay, so now you're going to tell me they take a significant step back, and they're in Autzen Stadium.
I'm saying they're more injured.
They are more injured, but it's such a bad matchup. I love Stanford. I love their physicality. If you turn on that defensive tape, you're like, these guys get it, man. They play hard. They play physical. They want to hit you in the mouth. But then you just go like this, and you go spread them out, and those guys go, I don't like this. I want to play in there. I want to get my hands on you. This is a team that's built on toughness and strength and, you know, taking that advantage. And just, it's a really, really bad matchup. They better score a lot of points, and they can't make mistakes in a hostile environment.
I felt so much better about Stanford's chances in this game until I watched what Marcus Mariota and that offense did throwing the football. Because while Stanford can get pressure on quarterbacks and they can make tackles in the backfield, they cannot cover in the back end. That's going to be a big
Wheaton, Cooks, you saw them both get off. I mean, you see that.
Yeah.
You know, on the subject of matchups, too, Notre Dame still has played Stanford. They had to go to overtime. Oregon has Stanford this weekend. Notre Dame, another one of those teams that's built in toughness. Brian Kelly saying that their strength is their defense, but not terribly impressive in their win against Boston College. And really, look, what they need to have happen realistically is for K-State or Oregon to lose. It's hard to envision a scenario right now because of the discrepancy in the votes as they stand in the Harris and the coaches poll that enough voters would change their minds about Notre Dame. Irish already #1 in the computers. Is there anything that could change your mind about Notre Dame and make you say, you know what, they should be in rather than K-State or Oregon?
I don't think so. Like you said, they need help in front of them. They need somebody to lose. They're #3 right now in the human polls for a reason, because they haven't been as consistently dominant week in, week out as a Kansas State or an Oregon. Now, I do think it is very interesting that Notre Dame shares two common opponents with both Kansas State and Oregon. Notre Dame and Kansas State have both beaten Miami and Oklahoma. Oregon and Notre Dame will have both played Stanford and USC by the time the season's over. When it's all said and done and the dust is settled, if all three teams are unbeaten, I think that's a tool that voters can use to compare and evaluate these three teams against each other. But Notre Dame is going to have to be so convincing in their next two wins to have any shot. They need help in front of them.
Well, here's what you said. You said Notre Dame hasn't been as dominant as Oregon and Kansas State. They haven't been dominant, period. Who have they dominated?
Well, Oklahoma they dominated, I think.
Let me tell you something, Mr. Television announcer. They don't ask you how you won. They ask you if you won, and they keep winning.
But this is a beauty contest. If we're talking about down to 3 people, who's more dominant?
Okay.
Am I wrong? I mean, if I'm
deciding, Notre Dame might look pretty good.
If I'm deciding between the three, they haven't been dominant. I mean, they don't dominate a bad team like Boston College. They don't dominate a Pitt team. I mean, they haven't dominated anybody. Do I love their defense? Yes. I think Notre Dame presents the biggest challenge to Oregon if they got in the championship game. Tuitt, Nix, explosive, big physical guys in the trenches. We've seen Oregon struggle with that in the past. That being said, Notre Dame hasn't gone out and just kicked people's heinies. Oregon, Kansas State, they've run through people.
What I have loved about Notre Dame, though, in recent weeks, guys, is the maturation of a freshman quarterback in Everett Golson. I really think he's getting better and better and playing the position with so much more confidence and so much more conviction. When you start a freshman at quarterback, you're going to get the good and the bad. Brian Kelly understood that at the start of the year in Ireland when they were playing Navy. He's made mistakes this year, certainly, but when you've watched the way this offense has flourished, the playbook is opening. They're doing a lot more things with him, moving the pocket. They got speed sweeps. They got sprint out sweeps. They got draws. They're doing a ton of different things in the running game as well as the passing game, using his physical attributes, his advantage, not turning the football over against Boston College. I know they're not a good defense. But just making better decisions. He's getting better. This offense next year and the year after and the year after is going to be really, really good.
And it always is. It always has been historically under Brian Kelly. The SEC has won 6 straight national championships. As it stands right now, Southeastern Conference wouldn't have a team in the title game. At the moment, sitting atop the heap of 1-loss or 2-loss teams, Alabama, after losing to Texas A&M, the Crimson Tide, falls to #4. Look, they're 4. They're 1 spot ahead of Georgia. That's a moot point because they're going to play each other if Alabama beats Auburn and makes the championship game. Crimson Tide, if you have 2 teams in the top 3 undefeated lose, Alabama or Georgia winner, best position to play as a 1-loss team for a championship?
Who would you want to play? Or
No. Who's best positioned to do it?
I think it's a tough question because if you look at Alabama, I just like I told you last week, Reese, I think they're defensively they're less talented than they've been in the last 4 years. I don't think they're where they were. But I will say, if you give Nick Saban more time and if you start projecting down the road if a team could really win a championship, I think Alabama poses the biggest threat to anybody because Nick Saban, with that much time to prepare, I think will lock down most teams. But it will be an interesting matchup with Georgia because we've seen them struggles with teams that have balance on offense, and Georgia's playing well. Their defense has really clicked. I mean, we all took shots at this defense. Sean Williams took shots at this defense, talking about how soft it is. Alec Ogletree, Bakari Rambo, once those guys have started to gel, they've gotten a lot better. But I think about Aaron Murray versus that Tide D. And the amount of confusion that they can cause, and when he doesn't know, if he doesn't know the mail, if he hasn't read the mail and knows what the play is and gets confused a little bit, he tends to hold on to it, and that offensive line would struggle a little bit.
That's my biggest concern in that matchup, if it is in the SEC title game, against good defenses this year. Aaron Murray, Florida, South Carolina, only completing 42% of his passes. Yeah. But they have so much talent, like you said. And I think Alabama's certainly a very complete team, but they proved they're mortal. If they don't bring their A game, they cannot be good enough at times to win games. And we've talked about Georgia all season long. If they play their complete game, offense, defense, and special teams at the same time, they can beat anybody. And I think this past week against Auburn was the first time they've done that. Now, they've had injuries at wide receiver, but I still think Tavares King and Malcolm Mitchell, these guys pose problems.
They're good enough.
And all that NFL talent on defense. When they're rolling, they're tough to move the football against.
Okay, let me ask you guys this. Project ahead a little bit. Assuming Alabama and Georgia play in the SEC championship game, will that prove to be a national semifinal, and will the winner play for the national championship?
I don't think so, because I think they need help in front of them.
Do you hear all the heads spinning around the world?
Right,
I know.
Like everybody in Big Ten, Big 12,
Kansas
Pac-12,
State
they're
have
going,
to lose.
no, that can't happen.
They would need 2 of the 3 in front of them to lose.
But could it happen?
I think it could happen. I think Oregon and Kansas State are going to win out.
Okay.
I think there's a chance. I mean, the way Kansas State plays, they have 2 weeks to prepare, and they play in Little Manhattan. They're going to be obviously favored against Texas, but it could happen. They could lose that ball game. Notre Dame could lose to USC, and everybody at home throwing things at the TV right now because you look at 4 through 9 being all SEC teams, you could have it again. Everybody's got SEC fatigue, but you could get it again.
Or SEC envy.
Or SEC envy, but you could get it again because they're going to be sitting there right in that prime position, and Alabama and Georgia are going to play each other. And
lots of football to be played.
Don't like
lots
it.
of ball.
Don't like
it. Hey, K-State, you're at the top now.
Win.
You're the hunted. You're going to get everybody's best shot. How do you deal with it? Oregon's been there before. They've seen it. Notre Dame coming up, big challenge.
That's a point worth making, too. Of the teams at the top, I know Notre Dame historically has played big games. Oregon, only team really that has guys on the roster who've dealt with this type of pressure. Not even Kansas State, but they do have Optimus Klein. I know that changes everything for you.
It does.
BCS Countdown. We'll roll on. A.J. McCarron and the Tide went down. Some other one-loss teams, Florida State, Clemson, can't seem to get enough love from the computers. Continue talking BCS when you come back.
BCS Countdown is presented by Vizio. Welcome to the PC. Reimagined.